So we got the scat rotating assembly. This is a 360, an LA 360. I'm going to be building for a 73 Dodge Charger. I pulled it out. It's originally a 360. It's bored 30 over. So we're going to be going for a 408 stroker. And like I said, I already got the rotating assembly. I got the crank torqued in right now. I'm doing the final assembly right now. So I gotta throw my pistons in. Gotta clean up the bores real quick. Slide the pistons in. I'll have to compress the rings. Ring compressor. So yeah, I'll grab the pistons and we'll see how this goes. So these right here are my Icon pistons that I got with the rotating assembly kit from Scat. It's got the I-beam rods, full floating pins. I pre-installed all this. I put it all together on the bench when I had time. So I did the ring gaps before I installed those onto the pistons. So I did all the prep work and then put all the pistons together on the table, and I have them all boxed here ready to go in the motor. So right now I'm going to clean the board. So now I gotta put the piston on the ring compressor to compress the rings to fit down into the bore, but you gotta line up the rings to the right spot by whatever your manufacturer recommends on your piston rings. So I got Total Seal piston rings. So in their sheet it explains that you want your rings to be orientated just like this. So if I take my number one piston, it's going to be facing like this, so it'll be in the motor, or this way in the motor. So facing forward is towards me. So if we orientate it, it's going to be facing to the right from right here would be the engine front. So if we turn this so the engine front is facing forward, just like it says right here, you gotta take, hang on, it's hard for me to do this with one hand. You gotta take your ring, so it says right here, you want your top compression ring to be facing to the right. So right here, I gotta rotate this ring around to where that gap right there is facing to the right. And then go back to your specs. The second compression ring is going to be facing complete opposite, 180 degrees. So you do the same thing. The top one's here. You take your bottom one, or your second groove. It's kind of hard to do this, show you guys with one hand, but see, I'm almost already there. So I'm going to flip this over, and this is going to be rotated to about right there. So now that ring, the second groove, the opening is facing towards us right there, and the other one is 180 degrees from it on the top right there. So you do that with all the rings. Just follow the guide. I'm going to do that real quick. And then after that, you got to take your ring compressor, put it over your piston, lock it down so it's compressing the rings in the right location. So when you slide it into the bore, they stay where they're supposed to be. Okay, so I got the rings all in the right spot. Went through. I oiled the inside of the piston ring compressor and opened it enough to slide over the rings, slid it down, got it a little snug, and then adjusted it to where I could have just enough underneath the rings, so when I slide this into the cylinder, I only have to knock it out a little bit into the cylinder. Otherwise you end up scratching up the sides of your pistons, or it's just a pain in the ass. You have to knock it further. So I'm going to take this, bring it over here. I put extra oil inside the cylinder, but you want to slide this through and be careful not to gouge the side of your cylinder with this. You could even just wrap it in tape. That's what a lot of people do. I'm using ARP bolts, so there's no studs sticking out. But if you do have studs sticking out right there, you can put a piece of rubber tubing over it so you don't damage the inside of your cylinder wall while you're sliding it in. And there you go. See? I just had this guy on there. I tapped it nice and slow with a rubber mallet. And you want to go super slow, because if you end up catching that lip with your rings and you don't notice it while you're hitting it with your mallet, you're going to bend your rings. So just keep an eye out for that. And you want to barely touch it. It's not even enough to scuff the surface. And then on the back side, you can see the piece of tape I ended up putting there just so I don't scratch the cylinder as it goes through. But yeah, now you can just pull up your rod. I already got it all cleaned up. The bearing's on it. I just gotta lube it. Put some assembly lube there, all on here. These are clean. I'm gonna wipe them down again just to be sure. And yeah, that'll be the first piston in. I'll clean this off. I already did. Do it again. rotating a little bit. I'm gonna wipe down the back side of the other one. I pre-assembled this, so these bearings are already installed. I know they're all good. I'm just double checking, making sure they're clean. On these, I'm using the Lucas oil, the semi-synthetic assembly lube. Don't be stingy with your assembly lube. So I want to rotate this to about there, tap this, so it seats. Okay, so we got that on. We'll get some of this assembly lube spread apart. It's all cooled up in the middle. And then make sure you put these caps on right. And the rod. You gotta put them both in right. You want the big chamfer towards the lobe on the crankshaft. And then the small chamfer goes towards the other rod. Like I said, I'm using ARP bolts. You don't want to forget to use your Ultra Torque ARP. Got to put this on the threads before you put them in there. So you want to put this on the threads. Basically anti-seize, but it won't change the spec of your torque. I know some stuff, put it on there and it'll change the way your bolts torque down. You want to put this on the head too. Do that with both of them. Put some on the head too. Just a generous amount all over my hands. Okay, so now these. And then with these, you want them to be just snug down. And then you go through, do all 4 cylinders on this side, and then rotate the block, do the 4 on the other side, and then you torque them down. And I just remembered, you gotta have the right kind of socket to get in there. So back to the hardware store. Alright, so as you can see, I got all 8 pistons in. Looking from the bottom, I had to flip it up so I could torque all the bolts. You can see. So now, flipped it over so I could torque all these bolts on the rods. So you gotta go through in steps. They gotta be 45 foot-pounds. So you wanna go 10 on each one, 20 on each one, 30 on each one, up to 45 in steps so it seats the bearings evenly. And with where the crank is right now, I can't get to this bolt or this bolt and this one down here. So I'm gonna torque all of them that I can get to in the steps all the way up to 45. And as you do each step, if you mark it, put a little dot right there so you know you went up the first ones to 10, put another one for 20, another one for 30, so you know when you're done where you're at. Or you can write 10, 20, 30, 45, it's up to you, just so you can keep track. So you're gonna have to rotate the crank to get to these bolts to torque them down. So you can do the ones you do right now that you can reach, mark them so you know they're done, so when you rotate it, you know which ones you didn't do. And then when you're done, once you have them torqued, mark the bolt so you know if it backed off ever. so that was at 30 foot-pounds. I already went through and did 10, 20, that was 30. Now we're gonna go up to 40. That one. We're gonna go through them again, but I want to mark it. Mark those again. And then we're gonna go up to 45. After I made my marks, I wrote the 45, so I know it's at 45 foot-pounds on each one of these. And then the ones I didn't do aren't marked yet, so I'm going to rotate the crank and then torque the other ones. Alright, so I rotated the crank, got it turned enough to where I could get these bolts. I can get my socket on there. This one and this one down in here. So I gotta torque that cap down, and the one right here, you can see the marks that I made before, the 45 foot-pounds, and my steps as I went up, and then these don't have them, so you can tell which ones you gotta do. So I'm gonna torque those down. So that's it. We got them all torqued down. They're all in there. Ready for the oil pump. Alright, so we're back here working on the 408. I'm gonna do these freeze plugs next. We got the 6 on the outside, and then we got 2 more, one there, a smaller one there that I gotta do. I already put that one and that one in. I did that off of the engine stand because you can't get to it. So before I put the rotating assembly in, I put this back on a bench and knock those in real quick and then put it back on the stand. So when you do these, you're going to be pressing these in, and you got to clean up this surface really good in here and then coat it with an RTV. I'm using this right here, Felpro. They're silicone. You can use gasket maker, pretty much whatever. Got them all lined up right here. So I'm gonna start knocking those in. I'll show you the first one and then knock them all out. So when I put these in, you gotta knock them in here, you gotta press them in. So some people use a socket that's just a little, about the same size as the freeze plug or a little smaller, so it will fit in. But what I do, because you want to knock it just under the surface, so it will sit barely underneath the surface. So when you do this, I like to use a piece of bar stock that is bigger than the freeze plug, so you don't have to worry so much about knocking it all the way through. Because if you hit it with a smaller socket too far, it's just gonna pop through and be on the inside of this, and it's a pain in the ass to get that out. You have to literally fold the freeze plug in half to pull it out. So I use a piece of bar stock that's bigger diameter, so I can just hit it with a mallet and pop that all the way in until this meets the surface of the block. Then I know I'm almost where I need to be, and then get a socket and tap it just a little bit further. I run the RTV on this side of it, just a little bead, because it's just gonna fill the imperfections that are in the walls of this, the scratches that are possibly there. So when you put this on, you don't want a bunch of the RTV to end up in your water jackets. So if you put it just on this lip right here, as you press it in, it'll push the extra RTV to the outside of the motor, and then you don't have to worry so much about that. So now you can see I knocked the first one in. It's flush with the block. There's a little bit of extra of the RTV that pushed out this way. Swipe that up. And then when you put these on, it's always nice to orientate that the correct way, so it says made in USA and the diameter and everything of the freeze plug when you flip the block the right way. So with that on there, now I can take a socket, put it inside the freeze plug, and knock it just a little bit further. I couldn't find a socket, but I'm just going to use another piece of bar stock that's a little smaller and just tap it in a little bit further. Now you can see it's seated just beneath the surface.